We are ninjas, we are brothers, we're united and we're strong. We are ninjas, we are turtles, we are heroes, sing a song. The Legend of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Part 1, Chapter 20, Mutation. Written and performed by Joseph Chambers and based on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Kevin yelped as about 100 different needles filled with various fluids shot out from different points in the wall of the chamber and pierced his flesh. It burnt as he squealed in pain as it fused to his bones and muscles. Meanwhilst, many other fluids were being injected into Peter, and when they ensconced Peter's internal systems, he felt as if his skin was being deeply sliced 1,000,000 times over. He had no time to scream before his legs gave way beneath him and his body sagged to the floor. On the ground, he seemed to convulse in a massive seizure, clutching his head as if he was trying to keep it from bursting open. The Shredder watched, rather sadistically, interested by and enjoying the thought of their extreme suffering. After 30 seconds of pain, everything stopped. Peter stopped convulsing, and both men staggered to their feet. They did not look or feel any different. Their bodies had absorbed the liquids, but there had been no effect other than scaring the daylights out of them. Both men gave sighs of a maximum amount of relief. "Get me out of here now, you crazy bastards!" Peter screamed as he tried to open the door. Then a pins and needles feeling took him over. He felt his arms, legs and torso begin to swell up. He also felt his clothes become tighter and tighter until they started to burst apart at the seams and fall off his inflated body. "Wow! Look at my guns! Look at my pecs! I feel like a god!" he roared with delight, beaming through and through. Then Peter noticed something that made his heart pump far more blood than it was designed to do. The skin on one of his hands was turning grey and rough. This proceeded to spread up his arm. It was as if his flesh was dying. He, without thinking, tried to rip the flesh from his arm, but found it was far thicker than it should have been, and instead just bent his fingernails back and tried to swear. This, however, proved impossible as his mouth, and indeed the rest of his face, was beginning to contort as his skull painfully reshaped with a series of loud cracks, each of which made him grunt and groan with agony. His mouth widened and the few teeth he had changed shape to be sharper and longer. He also felt new teeth growing in places there were once gaps. His nose flattened and his nostrils flared permanently into massive holes above his mouth. His eyes moved further apart, and the flesh on his new skull suddenly ripped above his nose, and a horn of bone slid through, followed by a second smaller horn above the first. His ears rose up the side of his head and shrunk, turning into pink, curled, leaf-shaped objects on the corners of his cranium. His hands also changed, so his fingers became bigger and the middle two fingers fused together permanently. A tail burst through the tattered remains of his jeans, and the rest of his body changed to have a rough, grey, thick skin. In the other compartment of the white box, Kevin too began to change rapidly and significantly. His flesh became an ugly greyish pink, and tiny white hairs sparsely spurted out of his hands and face. His body seemed to not be growing as large as Peter's, but similar things happened to Kevin's ears. His teeth were growing larger and sharper. Then, with a screech from Kevin, Great tusks shot out of his mouth and shone brightly with saliva in the harsh light of the claustrophobic cages of nightmare that encased the echoes of two men. The final and most disturbing change came to Kevin's nose. His nose became circular and shot out of his face as a wrinkled cylinder. Then the end of his nose turned a rose colour and two big holes formed into repulsive nostrils. He too had similar four-fingered hands to his friend and a brand new tail. Quite suddenly, Kevin sunk to his knees and then did something he had not done since his sister had committed suicide when she was 14 years old and he had only been 8. He began to silently cry. He sat on the cold floor and seemed to shrink into the haunted husk of a man, just staring at nothing and occasionally sniffing back the salty fluid trailing down his now horribly deformed facial features. Peter, meanwhile, was being far more externally aggressive and was beating the new grey skin on his hands raw by pounding against the clear wall of the cage-like container. "Ah, yeah!" he roared. He then continued to growl in a beast-like tone. Peter's eyes abruptly glazed over, and on all fours he pounced at the partition wall between the two cages. He smashed through this and into the undefended figure of the mutated Kevin, catching him off guard and digging his bigger horn right into Kevin's chest, puncturing the thick skin and forcing purple glowing blood to ooze everywhere. Kevin gave a shriekish grunt like a pig going to slaughter and lost consciousness. Peter joined him in this when an electric taser came out of a hole in the wall and jabbed the beast in the rump, causing him to slump forward and cease movement. "Stockman," the shredder called out. The slim, dark-skinned male scientist rushed forward and bowed to the shredder. "Remove the animals from these cages and take them to their cells. Get my medics to tend to the warthog's wounds," the shredder commanded. "Yes, Emperor," the man referred to as Stockman replied.